Hey everyone, Sarah Nova again. And this week around, we are talking about yet another little gem of a motorcycle. If you watch these videos, you realize there's a couple things that I've picked out, a couple of bikes, maybe more than a couple, that I like to say are real gems of their time. This is absolutely one. This is a 1989 Honda Hawk NT650. This particular bike and this particular one here has been modified for track use. It's in here for some repair. Wasn't running quite right, so we're going through it. So you see some things on it like a lack of a light. You see how or not we, but the owner has lowered the front end to change their rake, make it a little more aggressive for quicker turn in. Got this tape on the gas tank so you can grab your knee here and really hang off when you're cornering. So there's been some changes to it from the stock setup, but it's more or less a street bike that's been modified for track use. So the Honda Hawk is, in its time, pretty radical, I would say. It's the Ducati before Ducati did stuff. It was a naked bike, so the street version would have a headlight up here, obviously, and regular lighting. But it was a naked bike, just like the Ducati Monster was for 5 years later, that came out. I think these came out in 88. This one is, I said, 89. Pretty sure the Hawk came out in 88. But it was a naked sport bike, essentially, meaning it was, basically designed for cornering and going quickly, being light and flickable, but it didn't have all that bulky plastic on it. It was the original Street Fighter, if you will. So it had the Ducati Monster look, round headlight and stuff. And also something that Ducati seems to get the credit for, but Honda really didn't invent, but really pioneered the use of, is this fancy ass swing arm, which is a single-sided swing arm. Honda used it on their GP, or Elf really, on their GP bikes in the 80s. Ended up on the Honda RC30 750cc V4 in 87, and then a couple years later they put it on this bike, which is really, it's an aggressive thing for a bike that was meant to be a really good street bike. This wasn't built as a track bike necessarily, the Honda Hawk, but the single swing arm is functionally designed. It's got some really nice stiffness built into it, but also so a single nut just takes the wheel off. So for quick wheel changes at the track, stuff like that. So it's a lot of tech packed into this thing, which is essentially a really nice commuter bike. It's really kind of what it was built for. But it's kind of that's how Honda does stuff. So this is a 650cc single overhead cam liquid cooled V-twin, which doesn't sound that exciting nowadays, but in the late 80s, this was kind of something that was it was a nice package. It was enough power to run on a highway and go fast enough on back roads to scare yourself and get pulled over, but light enough to be very flickable. And we got twin discs up front, you got a single disc in the back. You have a lot of stopping power for a relatively light bike. At this point, in the 80s, the forks are finally getting bigger. Took a chassis developers a while to realize that to get a stiff fork, you really needed to have just a big diameter. Well before the upside down forks came into play to further that along, but at least it's moving along in that direction. And chassis wise, pretty advanced sport bike technology here. Box section, aluminum tubed, lightweight, stiff, rather than a cradle frame, which most of the stuff by this time of period was doing this design. But again, this is basically advanced sport bike technology crammed into a small V-twin, which is, for its time, very cool. There weren't a lot of people doing that. I think Ducati may have been the only two-cylinder sport bike at the time. I'm going to go on a limb and say that, and you're going to prove me wrong in the comments, I hope. Monoshock rear, again, normal for this time period, but showing the development of basically sport bike chassis technology. Just all around, there's a lot of bits on it I can point out. This particular bike has a Two Brothers racing pipe on it. They were tuners of these machines. A lot of stuff I can point out, but it's one of these bikes that where the details are great, but the whole package itself just really, really worked. And I've said this before in other videos. We did a video on the Honda Trans Alp, same time period. In that video, I got the displacement wrong. I called it a 650. It was a 600. I apologize, and I appreciate the corrections. But this time period, 88, 89, 90, brought in, Honda was bringing in some really interesting bikes that the American market, by and large, just rejected. So in that mix, we had the VTR 250, 250cc V-twin double overhead cam liquid cooled bike with 6 speeds and rev to 14,000 RPM. Really fun bike to ride, really a bike that didn't get its due because Americans kind of just dismissed it as a commuter bike, a small bike, but it's actually a very capable light sport bike. Very cool. Also in that mix is the Honda CB1, 400cc inline four, basically a miniature 400cc superbike. Double overhead cam, liquid cooled, 6-speed gearbox, inline four, naked like this machine, sort of, the naked before naked bikes were a thing. Also very cool. I happen to own one of those. I race it on the track sometimes and I do track days with it. Amazing machine to ride, and I can outbrake R1s into corners, and it feels great. Also in that mix, as I said, was the Transalp, and which is a dual sport bike. The BMW was doing dual sports at that point. Nobody else really was, so it's really cool. 650 and 600, they made both versions. V-twin with long travel suspension and a go anywhere machine. That was just really great. So there was a whole period of Hondas that came in that were awesome, and Americans just didn't buy them. So that's really sad for us. They sold elsewhere in the world, and they kept running those lines elsewhere in the world. But what happens is these bikes become cult bikes. So there's people who are really into VTRs, there's people who are really into Transalps, people who are really into CB1s, and people who are into Honda Hawks. And also, they've become a really good club bike because they made enough of them that parts are available. Them being Hondas, they're really reliable. You can run a stock bike pretty hard, and it's pretty hard to blow it up. You can make them even faster. You can bore them out to 750. You can do all sorts of stuff with them. So they're really great club racers that have nowadays they're considered vintage. So in our racing club, for example, there's several people running these things, and they're capable. They're fun. Torque is great. You can just pull in any gear. So they're very forgiving, but also very, very quick. Now what's funny is, as I said, these bikes didn't sell that much in this country, but they laid the groundwork, or helped lay the groundwork, for a bike that did become very popular. And we'll just talk briefly about this one over here. We just happen to have both of them here. This is the Suzuki SV650. Again, a 650cc liquid cooled, this time double overhead cam, 6-speed motorcycle. These have sold incredibly well, and I don't know if it's just the timing was different, the generation was different. It's moved up enough that these are a bit more powerful than these, and actually we're racing in our club. These have become eligible for vintage racing now, so we have these both on track at the same time, and these are clearly a generation ahead as far as top line, straight line speed goes. So it's kind of interesting to see, but I'm not really sure why the SV managed to sell quite a bit when the 650 did not, when the Honda Hawk did not. I'm going to say it's more about timing than it is about the actual bikes, because, as I said, the Honda Hawk was way ahead of its time. But maybe it was packed with things that people didn't know how to recognize. People didn't think of the single-sided swing arm as anything other than something that looked cool. Not sure, but yeah, these SVs are great. They I forget how long the run was, but they brought them in the 90s, I think late 90s, went to carbureted version, and there's 5 generations of them or something. There's a lot of different iterations of them. Ended up with fuel injection and pretty advanced stuff. 3 generations, okay. And they're a little bit more moved along. You can see the tech on them, but not that different in the end than the Honda Hawk. So there's a lot of the same architecture and same spirit in here. So yeah, so a couple of 650 Japanese V-twins, both immaculate machines, both amazing machines. I think that you have people who just swear by the SVs and always have and still do. You have people who really swear by the Honda Hawks. Just there's so much in there. And I think the Hawk gets cult status because there's a lot more than meets the eye to this. There's a lot of things packed in it, and it's more than the sum of its parts when you ride it. It's a compact package that really does a lot. So yeah, on my list of gems as far as motorcycles go. If you have any experience with these things or the SV, also a great bike to talk about, please chime in the comments. Love to hear them. If you have any information I missed, please feel free to add it. And if I get something wrong, please, correct me. I love being corrected. Helps me figure this stuff out more than I already know. So thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe. It definitely helps us out. And yeah, we'll see you next time.